They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. No one remembered a time before them. No one could imagine a time after them. They were tall, nearly 9 feet, with skin that moved like liquid silver. Their eyes glowed with pale light, and when they spoke, their words appeared directly inside the minds of those who listened. They did not need ships to travel between stars. They simply stepped through space itself, folding reality like cloth. They did not need weapons. Their thoughts alone could crush metal, shatter bone, and stop hearts. Every species in the known galaxy knelt before them. All of them called by the same name, the Eternal Ones, the Undying, the Gods. Because that is what they were, gods who walked among mortals and demanded worship. On the planet, the people had served for 8,000 years. Their cities were beautiful once, built with tall spires and gardens that floated in the air. Now those cities were ruins. They had torn them down long ago, leaving only enough for them to survive. Not to live, just to survive. Bora was 23 years old. He had gray skin like all, with thin fingers that bent in too many places. He worked in the processing plants, breaking apart old machines for metal that they would take. It was hard work. His hands bled most days, but he did not complain. Complaining meant death. He had a sister named. She was 15, with large dark eyes and a smile that could make even the worst days feel bearable. She worked in the food halls, preparing meals for the workers. Sometimes she would save a small piece of fruit for Bora, hiding it in her pocket and giving it to him when no one was watching. That small piece of fruit was the only sweetness in his life. Once every month they came for the offering. They would gather all in the central square, thousands of them packed together like animals, and they would choose the strongest workers, the minds, the most beautiful children. The chosen ones would walk forward and they would never be seen again. No one knew what happened to them. Some said they became servants in the palaces. Some said they were eaten. Some said they were taken apart piece by piece for experiments. It did not matter. They were gone, and that was enough to know. Bora had survived 23 years without being chosen. His sister had survived 15. But survival was just luck, and luck always ran out. The day of the offering came like it always did. Gray clouds covered the sky. Cold wind blew through the empty streets. They walked to the central square in silence, their heads down, their shoulders bent. They had learned long ago that crying or begging only made things worse. Bora stood in the crowd beside him. He could feel her trembling. She was trying to be brave, but she was still just a child. He wanted to tell her that everything would be fine. He wanted to promise that he would protect her, but he could not lie to her, not about this. The overseer appeared in the center of the square. It did not walk. It simply existed in one place and then existed in another. Its silver skin reflected the gray light, and its eyes swept across the crowd like searchlights. "Kneel," it commanded. The word was not spoken. It was placed directly into their minds, cold and sharp like a blade. 10,000 dropped to their knees. Bora knelt. They all knelt because there was no other choice. The overseer moved through the crowd. It stopped here and there, pointing at someone with a long silver finger. Each person it pointed at stood up and walked forward. Their faces were empty. Their eyes were dead. They knew what being chosen meant. Bora kept his head down. He tried to make himself small, invisible. He had learned this trick years ago. Do not stand out. Do not be noticed. Do not be anything. But was different, was beautiful with her dark eyes and gentle smile, could not make herself invisible. The overseer stopped in front of them. Bora felt his heart turn to ice. He did not look up. He could not look up. If he looked up, he would do something stupid. He would try to fight, try to run, try to save his sister, and then they would both die. "This one," the overseer said, and its silver finger pointed at. Made a small sound. It was not a scream. It was not a cry. It was just a tiny noise like a bird that had been stepped on. Then she stood up and walked forward because that is what the chosen ones did. They walked forward and they never came back. Bora did not move. His hands were pressed against the cold ground. His whole body was shaking. But he did not move because moving meant death, and if he died, there would be no one left to remember. "Do not weep," the overseer announced to the crowd. "To serve the Eternal Ones is the highest honor a lesser being can achieve." Bora did not weep. He watched his sister walk away with the others, her small figure disappearing into the group of the chosen. He watched until he could not see her anymore, and something inside him changed. The fear was still there, it would always be there. But now there was something else too, something hot and sharp and hungry. Hatred, pure hatred, burning so bright that it felt like fire in his chest. That night Bora did not go home. He walked through the dark streets until he reached the old temple district. The temples had been destroyed centuries ago, burned because they did not want to worship anyone but them. But beneath the ruins there were cellars, hidden places where people met in secret. The ash. That was what they called themselves, because ash was all that remained after the burned everything else. There were maybe 50 people in the cellar when Bora arrived. Mostly, but also a few traders with their 6 arms and a handful of scholars with their strange, clouded eyes. They all looked at him when he entered. They all saw the fire in his face. "My sister was taken," Bora said. His voice was flat, dead. "I want to fight." An old name shuffled forward. He was ancient, his gray skin wrinkled and loose, but his eyes were sharp. He had been fighting the longer than Bora had been alive. "You cannot fight the Eternal Ones," said. "No weapon can hurt them. No army can stand against them. This is known." "Then why are you here?" Bora asked. Smiled. It was a thin, tired smile. "Because there is hope, a small hope, a distant hope, but hope." He led Bora to a corner of the cellar where old star charts were spread across a table. The charts showed the galaxy, the core worlds where they ruled, the middle territories where the slave species lived, and the outer arms where the stars were thin and cold. "There," said, pointing to a small dot on the very edge of the map, "a planet called Earth, a species called humans." "Another slave race?" Bora asked. "No," his voice dropped to a whisper. 40 years ago they sent a conquest fleet to their world, 300 warships, 12 ascendants, the most powerful of all. Bora waited. None of them returned. The words hung in the air. Bora stared at the old, trying to understand. 300 ships, 12 ascendants, gone. "How?" he asked. "We do not know, they do not speak of it. They have erased all records of that fleet, but we know it happened. We have sources, spies, fragments of truth," placed his hand on Bora's shoulder. "The humans did something that no one believed possible. They killed gods." Bora looked at the small dot on the map. Earth, humans, a species that could kill the unkillable. "I want to meet them," he said. Nodded slowly. "Then we will find a way." The journey took 3 months. Bora traveled on a stolen cargo ship with 7 other members of the Ash. They moved slowly, hiding in the spaces between stars where they did not look. They passed through dead systems and empty sectors, always watching, always afraid. They controlled everything. Their ships patrolled every major route. Their spies watched every port. If they discovered the Ash, there would be no trial, no prison, just death, quick and complete. But the Ash had been doing this for centuries. They knew how to hide. They knew which routes were safe and which officials could be bribed. And most importantly, they knew that they were arrogant. The Eternal Ones did not believe that any slave species could threaten them. That arrogance was the only reason the Ash still existed. When the cargo ship finally reached the outer arm of the galaxy, Bora felt something he had not felt in years: hope. The stars here were different. Thinner, colder, spread far apart. This was the edge of known space, where this power grew weak. And somewhere in this darkness there was a species that had made gods bleed. The human patrol ship found them within hours of crossing into their territory. It was not a beautiful ship. It was gray and angular, covered in sensors and weapons. It looked like it had been built for one purpose only, to fight. No decorations, no grace, just metal and guns. A voice came through the communication system. It spoke in a language Bora did not understand, but the translation device in his ear converted the words. Unknown vessel, you have entered Earth Coalition space. State your identity and purpose, or you will be destroyed. Bora looked at who was operating the communications panel. The old's hands were shaking. This is a refugee vessel from space, transmitted. We are members of a resistance movement. We request an audience with your leaders. We need help. There was a long silence. Bora imagined the humans on that ship discussing what to do with these strange aliens who had appeared at their border. Would they help? Would they care? Or would they simply turn them away? The voice returned. Follow us. Any hostile action will result in immediate destruction. The human patrol ship led them deeper into their territory. They passed through a system with a yellow star and several planets. One of the planets was blue and green and covered in white clouds. Earth, the of the species that had killed gods. But they did not go to Earth. Instead, they were taken to a massive station orbiting one of the outer planets. The station was enormous, larger than any structure Bora had ever seen. Ships moved around it like insects around a hive, cargo vessels, patrol ships, and massive warships bristling with weapons. Bora and his companions were escorted off their cargo ship by human soldiers. The soldiers wore gray armor and carried weapons that looked simple but deadly. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but Bora could feel their eyes watching every movement. The humans were smaller than he had expected. Most of them were about the same height, as some even shorter. Their skin came in many colors: brown, pink, tan, black. They had hair on their heads in different shades. They looked soft, fragile, ordinary. And yet they had destroyed a conquest fleet. Bora could not understand it. These creatures did not look like warriors. They did not look like gods. They looked like merchants or farmers or workers. How could they have killed the Eternal Ones? The soldiers led them through long corridors to a meeting room. It was a plain space with a metal table and uncomfortable chairs. No decorations, no symbols of power, just a room for talking. A woman was waiting for them. She was of medium height, with black hair pulled back tightly and dark eyes that seemed to look through everything. She wore a simple uniform with no medals or symbols of rank. But when she stood, everyone in the room went quiet. I am Commander, she said. Her voice was calm and clear. I lead this sector. You have traveled a long way to reach us. Stepped forward and bowed deeply. Commander, we are the Ash. We represent millions of beings across dozens of worlds who live under rule. We have come to beg for your help. Did not bow back. She simply studied them with those sharp eyes. I know who they are, she said. We have met them before. The Conquest Fleet, Bora said. He could not stop himself. 40 years ago, 300 ships, 12 ascendants, you destroyed them all. Turned her gaze to him. Yes. How? The question hung in the air. Bora knew it was rude to ask, but he needed to understand. He needed to know that the could die. Was silent for a moment. Then she sat down and gestured for them to do the same. They are powerful, she said. They can do things that seem like magic. They can bend space, crush metal with their thoughts, shield themselves from almost any weapon. When they first came to our system, we thought we were going to die. We had nothing that could hurt them. She paused and something changed in her eyes, something cold. But power makes you lazy. They had not faced a real enemy in thousands of years. They did not know how to fight. They knew how to conquer. They knew how to terrify. But fighting, real fighting, against someone who will not give up, they had forgotten how to do that. Bora leaned forward. What did you do? We studied them. We watched how their powers worked. We found the small moments when they were vulnerable, the fraction of a second when they used their abilities and their defenses dropped. Then we built weapons that could strike in that exact moment. His voice was flat, emotionless. We sacrificed thousands of our own people to learn their weaknesses. We sent ships that we knew would die just to gather information. We turned our own star into a weapon and used it to blind their sensors. And when they finally understood that we would not surrender, that we would fight until every last human was dead, they tried to run. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. We did not let them run. The room was silent. Bora felt a chill run down his spine. He had wanted to believe that the humans were heroes, liberators, but now he understood something else. The humans were survivors, and survivors did terrible things to stay alive. "You want our help," said. "You want us to fight for you." Nodded eagerly. "Yes, you have proven that they can be killed. If you join with us, if you bring your weapons and your ships." "Why should we?" The question stopped cold. "They have not attacked us in 40 years, continued. "They stay away from our space. They fear us. If we go to war with them now, millions of our people will die. Billions, maybe. Why should we sacrifice our children for species we have never met?" Bora stood up. His heart was pounding. "Because if you do nothing, they will come for you eventually," he said. "Maybe not today, maybe not in 40 years, but they will come. They do not forget. They do not forgive. And when they come, they will bring everything they have. You surprised them once. You will not surprise them again." Studied him for a long moment. "What is your name?" "Bora." "Why are you here, Bora? What do you want?" Bora thought about her dark eyes, her gentle smile, the small piece of fruit she would hide in her pocket. "They took my sister," he said. "They have taken everything from my people. We have nothing left except our hatred. I am not asking you to be heroes. I am asking you to help us kill our enemies before they become strong enough to kill you." Nodded slowly. She looked at the other humans in the room, advisors, officers, soldiers, and some silent communication passed between them. Then she turned back to Bora. "We will help you, not because we are heroes, not because we are gods. We will help you because you are right. They will come for us eventually. And when they do, I would rather face them with allies than alone." She stood and offered her hand. "Welcome to the war." High Ascendant stood in the Chamber of Stars and looked at the galaxy he ruled. The chamber was aboard the flagship Eternal Dawn, the largest and most powerful ship ever built. Its walls were made of crystal that showed the stars outside, millions of lights burning in the endless dark. Had stood in this chamber for 3,000 years, watching empires rise and fall, watching species grow and die, watching everything change while he remained the same. He was immortal, he was eternal, he was a god. Or at least, that is what he had believed. The report on his desk told a different story. 17 patrol ships destroyed in the last month, 3 ascendants killed, a resistance movement growing in the slave territories, and behind all of it, one word that made silver blood run cold. Humans. He remembered them. 40 years ago, he had sent a conquest fleet to their insignificant world on the edge of the galaxy. It should have been easy. Humans were primitive, barely capable of traveling beyond their own system. They had no psychic abilities, no advanced technology, no understanding of the forces that they commanded. The fleet had never returned. At the time, had told himself it was a mistake. Perhaps there had been an accident. Perhaps a black hole or a spatial storm had destroyed the ships. He had chosen not to send another fleet because the human world was too far away, too unimportant. Better to focus on the territories he already controlled. But that had been a lie. The truth was simpler and more shameful. He had been afraid. Now the humans were no longer staying in their distant corner of the galaxy. They were reaching out, making contact with the slave species, providing weapons and training and something even more dangerous: hope. "High One," a voice said behind him, "you summoned me." Turned. A younger ascendant stood at the entrance to the chamber. Her name was Sira, and she was one of the most powerful of her generation. She could tear apart a starship with her mind alone. "I am giving you a task," said. "Take 500 ships and go to the border, find the humans, destroy them." Sira bowed her head. "It will be done, High One." And Sira's voice hardened. "Do not underestimate them. They are not like the other species. They do not surrender. They do not beg. They fight until they are dead, and they will try to take you with them." Sira smiled. It was the smile of someone who had never known defeat. "They are mortals, High One. We are gods. What can mortals do against gods?" Watched her leave, and he wished he shared her confidence. The battle happened 3 weeks later, near a dead star in the neutral zone between space and human territory. Sira's fleet arrived with all the glory of the 500 ships in perfect formation, their silver hulls gleaming, their weapons powered and ready. At the center of the formation were 12 ascendants, each one capable of destroying a city with a thought. The human fleet was smaller, only 200 ships, gray and ugly and practical. They were spread out in a loose pattern that made no tactical sense. It looked like they were running away. "They fear us," one of the ascendants said, "as they should." Sira smiled and gave the order to attack. The ships surged forward. Their weapons fired beams of pure energy that could cut through any known material. Their ascendants reached out with their minds, ready to crush the human vessels like insects. And then everything went wrong. The first sign was the explosions, dozens of them appearing all around the fleet. But these were not normal explosions. They were mines, hidden weapons that the humans had placed in the dead space days before. The mines did not use energy. They used simple metal fragments moving at incredible speed. Shields could stop energy weapons easily. They were not designed to stop solid objects. 30 ships died in the first 10 seconds. Sira felt the deaths like knives in her mind. She screamed and reached out with her power, trying to find the source of the attack. But there was nothing to grab. The mines were gone, destroyed by their own explosions. There was no enemy to fight, no target for her rage. "Find them," she shouted. "Find the human ships." But the human ships were no longer running away. They had split into small groups, darting between the vessels, too fast and too small to target easily. And they were not fighting like any enemy Sira had faced before. They were not trying to win. They were trying to cause chaos. Human fighters flew directly into ships, sacrificing themselves to create holes in the formation. Human missiles exploded not when they hit their targets, but when they got close, spraying fragments in every direction. Human ships that were damaged did not retreat. They accelerated toward the nearest vessel and detonated their reactors. Sira watched a human fighter fly straight at an ascendant named, raised his hand and crushed the fighter with his mind, crumpling it like paper. But in the instant he used his power, that tiny fraction of a second when his defenses dropped, a second human fighter that had been hiding behind the first fired a single missile. The missile hit in the chest. It was not a powerful weapon. It was not even a particularly advanced weapon, but it was enough. Who had lived for 2,000 years, who had conquered a dozen worlds, who had believed himself immortal, died in a flash of light and fire. Sira felt his death echo through her mind. She felt the shock and disbelief of the other ascendants. This was not possible. They were gods. Gods did not die. But another ascendant fell, and another, and another. The humans had studied them. They had learned exactly how powers worked, exactly when the ascendants were vulnerable, and they had built their entire strategy around exploiting those moments of weakness. "Retreat," Sira commanded. "All ships retreat." But the humans did not let them retreat. They had planned for this too. More mines appeared behind the fleet, blocking their escape. Human ships that had seemed destroyed suddenly came back to life. They had been playing dead, waiting for this moment. The battle became a slaughter. Sira was one of the few who escaped. She used every bit of her power to tear a hole in space and jump away, leaving behind the burning wreckage of her fleet. Of the 500 ships and 12 ascendants she had brought, only 43 ships and 2 ascendants survived. When she returned to the eternal dawn and knelt before High Ascendant, she could not meet his eyes. "They killed us," she whispered. "They killed gods." Was silent for a long time. He looked out at the stars, at the galaxy he had ruled for so long, and he understood something that he had been trying to deny for 40 years. The humans were not afraid of they did not worship them, they did not see them as gods. They saw them as enemies, and humans was beginning to realize were very good at killing their enemies. "Summon the Grand Fleet," said finally. "Every ship, every ascendant, we will go to their world ourselves. We will burn it to ash." Sira looked up. "High One, the Grand Fleet has not gathered since we had enemies worth destroying." Silver eyes glowed with cold fire. "The humans have made themselves worthy. If we do not destroy them now, they will destroy us. That is the truth. Accept it." Sira bowed her head. "It will be done." Turn back to the stars. Somewhere out there on a small blue world at the edge of the galaxy, a species of soft, short-lived creatures was preparing for war. They were not gods. They were not even particularly powerful, but they had something that they had lost long ago. They had the will to fight, and was beginning to fear that will more than any weapon. They came with 10,000 ships. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. Every warship, every cruiser, every fighter, 100 ascendants, the most powerful beings in existence, stood at the heart of the armada. Behind them came the support vessels, the troop carriers, the world burners that could turn a planet into molten rock. High Ascendant led them personally. He had not left the core worlds in over 1,000 years, but this was too important. This was the end of the human threat, once and for all. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Before them lay a yellow star and 8 planets. The third planet, blue and green and wrapped in white clouds, was their target. Earth, the of the species that had dared to defy the gods. "Begin the advance," commanded. "Destroy everything." The fleet moved forward like a wave of silver death. 10,000 ships, their weapons charged, their ascendants ready. Nothing in the known universe could stand against such power. Admiral watched them come from the bridge of the Defiance. The ship was old. It had fought in the first battle against the 40 years ago when was just a child. Her grandmother had commanded it then. Her mother had commanded it after. Now it was her turn. Around her, officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. No panic, no fear. They had known this day would come. They had been preparing for it their entire lives. "Enemy fleet entering the outer system," reported. 10,000 ships, 100 ascendants, just like we predicted. Nodded. "Signal all units. Execute Operation Final Answer." For 40 years, humanity had prepared for this moment. They had studied They had learned their weaknesses. They had built weapons and traps and plans upon plans upon plans, and they had turned their entire solar system into a killing field. The first wave of attacks came from the asteroid belt. They did not know that humans had hollowed out thousands of asteroids and filled them with weapons. Missiles launched from hidden bases, fired chunks of metal at 3% of the speed of light. Nuclear mines drifted in invisible clouds, waiting for ships to pass. The shields held against energy weapons. They were useless against solid projectiles moving faster than anything the universe had ever seen. 50 ships died in the first minute, 100 in the second. The fleet tried to form defensive formations, but the attacks came from every direction. There was no safe place. There was no escape. "Pathetic," snarled from the bridge of the eternal dawn. "Push forward. Use the ascendants to clear a path." The 100 ascendants moved to the front of the fleet. They reached out with their minds, crushing asteroids, detonating missiles before they could reach their targets, creating barriers of pure force that nothing could penetrate. For a moment, it seemed like they would break through. Then the sun exploded. Not the whole sun, just a small piece of it. The humans had spent decades placing devices deep within the star's corona, waiting for this exact moment. Now those devices triggered a massive solar flare, a wave of radiation and plasma that swept across the inner system like the breath of an angry god. The ships were built to withstand almost anything. They were not built to withstand the fury of a star. The flare blinded their sensors, overloaded their shields, and sent their formation into chaos. Ships crashed into each other. Communications failed. Commanders lost contact with their forces. And in that moment of confusion, the human fleet attacked. 200 ships emerged from hiding places on moons and inside hollowed-out asteroids. They were not beautiful ships. They were ugly and practical and designed for one purpose: to kill. Each one carried weapons that had been specifically designed to exploit weaknesses. Admiral led the charge personally. "All ships target the Ascendants," she commanded. "Hit them when they use their powers. Do not let up. Do not give them time to recover." The battle became a dance of death. Every time an Ascendant used their power to destroy a human ship, 3 more human ships would fire at the exact moment their defenses dropped. The missiles were small and simple, just metal and explosives, but they were timed with perfect precision by AI systems that could predict actions faster than they themselves could think. Ascendants began to fall. These were beings who had lived for thousands of years, beings who had believed themselves immortal, beings who had never known fear. Now they were dying, one by one, killed by creatures they had dismissed as primitive and weak. Bora watched from the observation deck of a human carrier, far enough from the battle to be safe but close enough to see the flashes of light. Each flash was a death, sometimes human, but more than human, many more. Beside him stood, and 50 other representatives of the Ash, witnesses to the impossible. "They're dying," whispered. "The Eternal Ones are dying." Bora said nothing. He just watched, feeling something strange and wonderful growing in his chest. Hope, real hope for the first time in his life. On the bridge of the eternal dawn, High Ascendant felt his world crumbling. 60 of the 100 Ascendants were dead. 3,000 ships were destroyed or crippled. The fleet was in chaos, caught between the human attacks and the still-raging solar storm. "How is this possible?" Sira demanded. She was wounded, bleeding silver blood from a dozen cuts. "They are mortals, they are nothing. How are they killing us?" Understood. He had finally seen the truth that he had been denying for 40 years. "Because they do not fear death," he said quietly. "Look at them. They send their ships into hopeless battles. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation. They fight not to win, but to hurt us. Every human who dies takes a piece of us with them." He watched a human fighter fly directly into an Ascendant, both of them disappearing in a ball of fire. "We have forgotten what it means to struggle. We have forgotten what it means to sacrifice. We have become soft, Sira, lazy. We rule through fear, not strength. And now we face an enemy that does not fear us. What do we do?" Closed his eyes. He was 3,000 years old. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had believed himself eternal. But nothing was eternal, not even gods. "We fight," he said. "We fight until we win or until we die. There is no other option now." The battle raged for 6 hours. The humans lost half their fleet. They lost far more. By the end, only 2,000 ships remained and only 23 Ascendants. The rest were dead, destroyed by creatures who should have been nothing more than insects. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Defiance, exhausted but still standing. The ship was damaged, barely able to move, but it had survived. "Enemy fleet is retreating," reported. "They're jumping out of the system." Watched the silver ships disappear, fleeing back to their core worlds. They'll return, she said. This isn't over. No, agreed. But we won. Against 10,000 ships and 100 ascendants, we won. Looked at the wreckage floating in space. Human ships, so much death. Victory always has a cost, she said quietly. Remember that. Every time we celebrate, we should also mourn. She turned away from the window. Send a message to our allies. Tell them the gods can die. Tell them to prepare for war. The war lasted 3 more years after the Battle of Saul. It was not a close war. They had lost most of their ascendants and their best ships. They had lost something even more important too, their belief that they could not be beaten. An empire built on fear could not survive once the fear was gone. The slave species rose up. On 100 worlds, beings who had spent their entire lives kneeling suddenly remembered how to stand. The ash came out of hiding. The all of them fought. They did not have powerful weapons or psychic abilities, but they had numbers and anger and the knowledge that their gods could bleed. Humans led the way. They trained rebel armies. They provided weapons and ships and tactical support. They showed the galaxy what a species could accomplish when it refused to accept the impossible. High Ascendant died in the 3rd year of the war, killed in the Battle of the Core. A human soldier named Minu fired the shot that ended him, a simple kinetic rifle, nothing special. Who had lived for 3,000 years, who had ruled half the galaxy, died just like any mortal. Some surrendered after that. They gave up their powers, accepted exile to distant worlds, tried to live as ordinary beings. Others fled to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, hiding in the dark places between stars. A few fought to the end, dying with fury and disbelief in their silver eyes. By the time the war ended, there were no longer gods. They were just another species, diminished and broken and learning what it meant to be mortal. Admiral, she had refused any higher rank, stood on the observation deck of the Defiance and watched the liberation of. The looked different now. The broken cities were being rebuilt. Gardens that had been destroyed for centuries were being replanted. Children played in streets that had known nothing but fear for thousands of years. Bora stood beside her. He was older now, his gray skin marked with scars from battles he had fought. He had become a leader of the new government, one of the voices that would shape his people's future. They're building temples to you, he said. On 100 worlds, they're calling humans the new gods. His expression did not change. Tell them to stop. I have told them, they do not listen. Bora smiled sadly. Can you blame them? You did what no one believed was possible. You made the immortal die. We did not make them mortal. Turned to face him, and Bora saw something in her eyes, not pride, not triumph, but a deep and tired understanding. They were always mortal. They had just forgotten. And humans, are you mortal? Smiled. It was a strange smile, full of knowledge and sorrow. Everything dies, Bora. Everything ends. The difference is that humans have never pretended otherwise. We know we are going to die. Every single one of us from the moment we are born knows that our time is limited. That knowledge shapes everything we do. She turned back to the window, to the freed world below. They ruled because they made everyone believe they could not be beaten. We beat them because we never believed anything was unbeatable. Not them, not ourselves, not death itself. Bora thought about this for a long moment. What will you do now? You could rule the galaxy. No one could stop you. No one could stop thee either. Look how that turned out. The Earth Coalition did not build an empire. They did not demand tribute or worship. They offered alliance to any species that wanted it and left alone those that did not. But they made one thing very clear. Never again would any being call itself a god over others. Never again would any species rule through fear alone. Humanity would be watching. Humanity would remember. And humanity, as they had learned, did not forgive. The years passed, the galaxy healed. Bora grew old. He married a woman named, a teacher who had survived the offering as a child. They had 3 children together then. Bora served in the government for many years before retiring to a small house near the coast, where he could watch the sun set over waters that had once been polluted with ash. He stayed in contact with. They exchanged messages across the stars, talking about politics and philosophy and the strange paths their lives had taken. She never visited, she was always too busy, always moving to the next crisis, the next challenge, but she sent gifts sometimes. Strange fruits from distant worlds, books of human poetry. Once, a bottle of something called whiskey that burned his throat but made him laugh. When Bora was very old, his hair white and his joints aching, he received a message that Admiral had died. Natural causes. She had been 93 years old. He wept that night, not from sadness but from gratitude. She had given him something precious. She had given him a future. 50 years after the war ended, in a small school a young girl named asked her teacher about the old times. Were there really gods? The teacher, old enough to remember the offering, old enough to remember the fear, smiled gently. No, child, they were never gods. They were just powerful, and they used that power to make others afraid. And the humans, are they gods? The teacher looked out the window. A human trading vessel was landing in the distance, bringing goods and news and the ordinary commerce of a free galaxy. Human children played with children in the streets below, laughing together in a language that had become common across a dozen worlds. No, the teacher said finally. The humans taught us something important. There are no gods. There are only people, some kind, some cruel, some powerful, some weak. What matters is not what power you have, but what you do with it. Nodded, not quite understanding. But she would. In time they all would. The galaxy that had once knelt before false gods was learning to stand on its own feet. It was not easy. There were still wars, still conflicts, still beings who tried to take power through fear and force. But there was also hope now. The knowledge that no one was too powerful to be challenged. No one was too strong to fall. In the darkness between stars, the last of the hid and waited. Some of them dreamed of revenge. Some of them dreamed of returning to their former glory. But deep in their hearts, they knew the truth. They had believed themselves immortal. They had called themselves gods. And then the humans had come, small, fragile, short-lived humans, and had shown them what they really were. Just mortal beings like everyone else. The galaxy moved on. New alliances formed. New technologies emerged. New generations grew up knowing nothing of the old fears, the old chains, the old kneeling. And somewhere in the records of 100 worlds, a simple truth was written down, so that it would never be forgotten. They once called them gods, until humans made them mortal. And the universe was never the same again.